Hello, I'm Kaiosho, and this is Ramblatory Nonsense, a show where basically I ramble about a subject or several subjects for maybe an hour or so. And right now, I want to talk about Half-Life 3, or maybe the whole Half-Life series in general. Let's go ahead and start with Half-Life 1, I suppose. So, Half-Life, I was really excited for it to come out. As you guys, if you've played the game, probably know, it was published by Sierra, and at the time, I had a subscription to Sierra's in-house magazine called Interaction. That was two words, interaction. Anyways, there were some articles in that just made it sound awesome. And then I was given the expansion made by Sierra for Diablo. If you guys didn't know, Diablo, the original Diablo, which was, I think, made by... I mean, I know it was made by Blizzard, but I forget who published it. But anyways, the expansion was made by Sierra, or at least published by them, which is really strange. But on the disc for that expansion, which was called Hellfire, there were videos about the production of Half-Life. And it was pretty friggin' amazing to me. They were talking about how they were doing different things and the different effects in the game. The skeleton system for models, so it didn't use so many system resources to have a lot of characters on screen, which pretty much every game does these days. I don't know if they invented it, but they definitely were one of the first ones to really use it to full effect. A lot of different stuff. It really, I was super hyped for Half-Life. I got it, I think, release day or right around release day, and I loved that game. I played it to death. I don't know how many times I've beaten it at this point. Maybe 4 or 5, somewhere around there. It's so good. So good. And that's not even counting the online multiplayer and mods and everything, like Team Fortress Classic, which was free, that Valve made and released as a patch that included Team Fortress Classic. I spent so much time playing that in clans and everything. Yeah. And then Counter-Strike, Day of Defeat, Natural Selection, Firearms, so many great mods, so much free gameplay, so many hours of free gameplay based on Half-Life, owning Half-Life. I have no idea how many hours, probably more than I've ever spent on any one thing in my life. So, Half-Life was a big deal to me. Big deal. And I played through the single player, I loved it, but I didn't play the expansion packs. Now, I guess I was kind of being like a neckbeard kind of nerdy kid at the time, in that since the expansions weren't developed by Valve and were instead developed by Gearbox, I wasn't interested in them. I'd become so invested in Gabe Newell, Doug Lombardi, and other people at Valve that I had no interest in playing a game set in the same universe that wasn't written by them. So I had no interest in them. And to this day, I still haven't played the expansions, and I know that's terrible. Some people say the expansions are even better, and, well, except for Blue Shift, which was, I guess, terrible? I don't know. But I played a lot of single-player mods. I don't know. Whatever. But, I loved Half-Life. So, and then when Half-Life 2 was coming out, I was as excited as humanly possible, but I did not have a PC that could play it at the time. I just didn't. And Steam, there was that whole Steam debacle at the time. Steam was terrible back then. I was kind of sort of boycotting Steam at the time. When they forced all the Half-Life games onto Steam, like Team Fortress Classic, Counter-Strike, all that stuff had to move to Steam Before the multiplayer had been done through WAN. It was like World Opponent Network or something like that. That was the central server system. It was great. It worked so well, even on dial-up. Like I had 56K dial-up, and I could play Counter-Strike and Team Fortress Classic flawlessly. Now sometimes you would have problems with people that have low ping, so you'd call them low ping bastards because they could base their shots could get to you before you had a chance to react to seeing them. It was kind of crazy, the net code back then, but it worked. Then they shut down. WAN was shut down, and they forced everyone onto Steam, and Steam was terrible. You could not, with a dial-up connection, you could no longer play those games. I don't know if they eventually fixed that or not, because eventually I had broadband anyways. But at that time, I was kind of boycotting Steam. So I didn't have a PC that could really run Half-Life 2, and also I was kind of boycotting Steam, and you had to have Steam to play Half-Life 2. Of course, these days, I absolutely love Steam, and I pretty much don't buy a game unless it's on Steam, except for maybe games on GOG. I do own, I don't know, 20 games or so on GOG, but man, Steam, that was a wreck back then. Anyways, Half-Life 2, I didn't play it when it first came out. I really, really wanted to. Eventually, I got my hands on a copy from a friend. He let me borrow his copy, and I finally played it, and I loved it, and there was a cliffhanger at the end, but at that time, the episodes had already been announced. Maybe episode 1 had already even come out. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But I wasn't too worried about the cliffhanger because I knew more stuff was coming. So I didn't play episode 1 or episode 2 at all before Orange Box. But when Orange Box came out, I bought that because I knew it would have everything. And I replayed Half-Life 2. Then I played episode 1, episode 2. Okay, that's a lie. I played Portal before I played anything else because I was super excited for that, even though pretty much no one else was. It was weird. I don't know why people weren't excited for that, but then it became this huge thing. Anyways, I played those, and I loved Half-Life 2 in the episodes. Half-Life 2, a large portion of the game, I feel like they were trying to make you feel a connection to Alex. If you don't know, she's the female character in the game. I feel like not the entire point of the game, but a large portion of their development went into Alex and what she looked like and how she responded to your actions. And a modern equivalent would be like Elizabeth in BioShock Infinite, like how much time they put into developing her. It's a similar thing, at least I think it is. And so you get really invested in this character, even more so in the episodes. Like, you don't play the whole game of Half-Life 2 with Alex. You play portions of it here and there, but in the episodes, she's with you, I think, the majority of the time. I know in episode 2, she's not for a chunk of it, but you get to know her, and you feel like they very purposely made you feel for her, made you form a connection with her as a character, as a person. So then, spoilers, everybody, and at the end of episode 2, they kill her father right at the end. Her father is a great character as well, Eli Vance. He is fantastic character, well written, the voice actor's fantastic, and you really come to like him as well. And then at the very end of episode 2, some shit happens, Eli dies, and the game cuts out with Alex crying and saying, "No, don't leave me." I can't tell you how big of a emotional impact that had on me at the time. I didn't cry, but only because I was in shock. I was just sitting there, not moving, and just like frozen. I feel like they made you get so invested in this character specifically just for that. I wouldn't be surprised if that was their plan all along, that they wanted you to become really, really invested in Alex and Eli, specifically so you could feel something when Eli died. Right? So, so after I finished it, I just sat there. I stared, I watched the credits, and I just sat there for a while. And I was just stunned and super depressed and sad, but not like to the point of crying. And then I went and did some other stuff for a few days. I didn't play any games. I just kind of thought about it. And then I decided I wanted to see the ending again. And I played it again. I had a save from right before the ending, so I did it again. And that time I cried harder than I've ever cried at a video game. Like, I was crying, full-on crying, not just weeping or leaking from the eyes or anything. I was crying. And then, even a year later after that, if I watched a video of it online or even someone mentioned the ending of that, I would be like I would almost cry just thinking about it again. That's how invested I was with those characters and that story. So then episode 3 gets announced. I mean, they announced episode 3 before episode 2 came out, I think. I'm not sure. So the story at the end of Half-Life 2 is that there's stuff happening in the Arctic, I think. And there's this ship, the Aurora Borealis, or is it just the Borealis? It might be the Borealis. And what's her name? The one chick, I can't remember. I'm blanking. I always forget names. She's on there, on that ship, and what you're doing right at the end before Eli dies is you're going to get in a helicopter to fly to that ship. And that end is like the biggest cliffhanger ever, but it's also the most painful cliffhanger ever. It's the most painful ending ever. And it's so frustrating. It is like the biggest and saddest blue balls ever to exist. Like, okay, let's put it this way. Let's say you're a guy who just found the perfect woman, and you have a great relationship, and you're gonna get married. But she's a little traditional. Her family's traditional. She doesn't want to have sex before the wedding. So, I mean, you really, really love her, and you also really want to have sex with her. But then, on your wedding night, she gets in a car crash and dies. Let's say that happens. So, not only do you not get to have sex with her, which that's not a big deal at this point, but you also don't get to ever see her again. Don't get to spend your life with them. It's the worst thing ever. And that's kind of how I felt with the end of episode 2. I know it's really melodramatic and really kind of dumb, but that's kind of how I feel about it. It's been so long. That was what, 2006, 2007? I don't know. And then Valve has released so many games since then. They did, what, Left 4 Dead 2. I realized Left 4 Dead was not completely Valve, and then it became Valve and all that. But then they did Portal, which maybe it was released the same time as episode 2 or right after. I don't remember if it was released by itself first. I don't think it was. I don't know. Well, Portal 2 then, and both Left 4 Deads. Dota 2, which I have no interest in. Don't even get me started on that. I'm sure there's been other stuff. There was that one, that freeware top-down alien game. Alien something? Infestation? No, I don't think that's it. Something. They've released a whole bunch of shit since then. And Counter-Strike, various versions of Counter-Strike. Global Offensive is the only one that came out since then. Anyway, I'm rambling, but that's what the show kind of is. Still, Half-Life Episode 3, Half-Life 2 Episode 3, was supposed to come out. And, I mean, Valve already kind of fucked up early on with the episodes, because it was supposed to be like... I forget what the original plan was. Was it an episode every 6 months or an episode a year? But it ended up being the time between episode 1 and episode 2 was so incredibly long that it was a little crazy. But it happened, and it was fantastic. But then episode 3, we waited. And we waited. And we waited. And in the meantime, other games were getting released. And it felt like Valve was either really working hard on making Episode 3 awesome, or they were working on Half-Life 3 and just scrapping, well, more like integrating what they were planning for Episode 3 into a full game of Half-Life 3. But we've pretty much heard nothing. There's been interviews where people have asked, like Gabe Newell, about Half-Life 3, and there's one especially that everyone likes to talk about, which was where some interviewer asked him about Ricochet 2. Ricochet was a free mod for Half-Life. It was kind of like Tron, Deadly Discs kind of thing, where you jumped around and threw discs at each other. Anyways, it was a joke. The guy was talking about Half-Life 3 or Half-Life 2 Episode 3, and Gabe Newell basically said, yeah, we're kind of working on it, sort of. It's kind of ridiculous. That was, I don't know, a couple years ago now, and we've still heard nothing. One of my theories was always that they're working on a new graphics engine, and they're waiting to finish that, to get that up and running before they would be able to finish off Half-Life 3. And then I finally thought, oh, you know what? Maybe they're waiting for the next console generation before they announce anything about Half-Life 3, so they can make it look like a really fantastic new game. Like, every Half-Life game has looked really great for its time. Maybe the episodes not so much, since it was the same engine, but it did look better. Every episode looked better than the last. Still, I think they feel like it needs to be revolutionary in graphics and gameplay. I mean, the gravity gun was like this big thing when it happened, and granted, a lot of games have included stuff or almost directly ripped off the gravity gun. Like in Singularity, you have your MacGuffin item that you have is it can do gravity gun stuff, but it can also do a whole bunch of other stuff. But I feel like they feel like they need to do something completely revolutionary and also look really fantastic and like the next generation of graphics, you know? And so I thought maybe after the consoles were announced, we would have at least an announcement on Half-Life 3. I mean, pretty much everyone at this point thinks they're working on Half-Life 3 and not Episode 3. In fact, I'm pretty sure everyone at Valve assumes it's Half-Life 3. In fact, Gabe Newell even has a really trolling picture of him in his office with a desktop wallpaper that's Half-Life 3. So, yeah. Boy, they love to troll people. It's just really frustrating. And in the original Portal, which, like I said, I think it came out at the same time as Episode 2, there were references to it being in the same universe as Half-Life. Like, there were references to Black Mesa and how Aperture Science was in competition with Black Mesa, and they were both working on Portal technology, which they were. So, it makes sense. But then in Portal 2, one of the most frustrating things for me, and I even read an article recently about that a guy had written about how he hated Portal 2, but it actually came down to the fact that there weren't any references to Black Mesa or the Half-Life universe in Portal 2. And I felt the same way when I first played it. When I first played it, even though I really enjoyed the game, I had my complaints, like the loading screens. Why the hell were there loading screens in Portal 2? The the original Half-Life, Half-Life 1, one of the biggest things that it did for the industry that people thought was really cool was that it didn't have loading screens. When it needed to load, the game just kind of froze for a second. You never the screen never went black, never got taken away. You were still kind of, even though the game froze for a second, you're mentally still immersed. And they carried on with that all the way up until Portal 2. For some reason, they put loading screens in, and I don't understand why that was. Might have been some sort of technical thing. I don't know. But that was one thing I didn't like about Portal 2. And yeah, I too was really disappointed that they didn't do anything to tie into Half-Life 3, or even make Portal 2 be like the successor to the Half-Life series, or anything like that. So, I mean, there were so many theories that Chell and Gordon Freeman were gonna like team up or something. People were really talking about that stuff before Portal 2 came out, but I guess that didn't happen. And I'm still just so depressed. Like, anytime someone brings up Half-Life 3 or Episode 3 or just Half-Life 2, I have an actual physical reaction in my body. I just kind of slump a little bit and I feel really depressed. Granted, it's been so long at this point that that feeling goes away fairly quickly and turns into anger, but it's still there. It's really frustrating. They spent all this time and effort to get us invested in this story and these characters, and then they just fucked off and did other stuff. Valve's got a really strange way of doing things in their company, the way the company is structured. If you've never read the final hours of Half-Life 2 or the final hours of Portal, or was it Portal 2? I forget. I think it was Portal 2. I don't know. These are articles by Jeff Keighley, where he actually went to Valve and spent a lot of time with them over the final hours of making these games. And there's a lot of insight into how the company works in those articles. You really should read those. Also, the book Raising the Bar, which is about Half-Life 2 being developed. Valve is really strange. The way they do things is people in the company don't really have positions. They just do what they feel like doing. So if some people decide, you know what, I really liked Dota and I kind of like League of Legends, I want to work on a sequel to the original Dota. So one person might say, oh yeah, okay, I want to do that, and then a couple other people are like, you know, that's a good idea, let's work on that. And then, you know, Gabe Newell himself, I'm pretty sure he's really into Dota. So they work on what they feel like they want to work on, which for the employees has got to be the greatest job ever if you can wrap your mind around it. I've heard that there's people that have been hired there that they either had to fire or the person quit after not too long because they weren't self-motivated to work on things that they wanted to work on. But I think that's also part of the problem. The reason we don't have Half-Life 3 yet is because the people at Valve are constantly deciding to just work on random shit. And I'm not saying it's bad. None of it's bad. It's just, I don't know. I just don't know. Another theory I have is that they won't release Half-Life 3 until they get their SteamOS up to the point that they want, and assuming they ever release their Steam controller, which to me always looked a bit bad. It looked like if you ever tried to play a game with a trackball, you try to aim at something, but then you have to recorrect and overcorrect and correct before you get the crosshair on the right spot. You could see that in the videos back when they were showing gameplay with the controller. You could see it when they were playing Portal or whatever they were playing. So that controller, I'm sure it's playable, but I wouldn't want to play games with it. So maybe if they're waiting until they get that controller right and get SteamOS out there and enough people using it, and then release Half-Life 3 and say, if you want to play this, you got to play it with SteamOS. And optionally, we fully have support for the Steam controller, assuming that ever comes out. Maybe that's what they're waiting for. The new consoles are out. There's nothing there. So at this point, my theory, they're fucking off doing other things. They're maybe working on a new graphics engine. They have to wait till that's done. And then also, they're just, I don't know. I'm just so frustrated. It's a shame, really, because let's say a game like BioShock Infinite. Their main goal with that game was Elizabeth and making you feel a connection to her, and I think she was largely inspired by Alex, and I think they did a really, really good job. And I think that is only going to make Valve want to work more on Alex for the new game. And I wonder if that was another roadblock for them. That they saw, wow, they did really good with Elizabeth. Which, I mean, okay, she had some little quirks, like none of the enemies attacking her ever, but you know, she was great. I felt a real connection to her, just like I did to Alex, except, you know, the Burial at Sea episodes. God damn it, Ken Levine. Anyways, Half-Life 3 is probably going to happen someday. I don't know when. I don't think anyone knows when. I don't even think Gabe Newell knows when. And it's really sad and depressing. And I want it to happen. So if anyone from Valve actually listens to this, which not very likely, just tell us something. Anything. Give us a little bit of hope. Or just tell us, if this is the case, just tell us that you're canceling it, that you're never going to make Half-Life 3, that you've given up on the Half-Life series, that it's never going to be completed. The story's just going to stay where it's at. And at least we'd have a little bit of closure. That's all we really need at this point. That's all I need at this point. I just need some closure. I feel like I keep using these weird metaphors, but I feel like a parent whose child has disappeared, and they're gone, and they've been gone for years, and you've not heard from them. Police haven't found anything, and they're not happy. Well, they're satisfied when the police finally come across their child's body, just because they have closure. And that's how I would feel if they would tell us, okay, we're not going to do any more Half-Life. And it would be really depressing and really sad. And obviously, again, I'm over-dramatizing here. But it's the same kind of thing. I would just be satisfied with that. It would be the most depressing press release since, well, there's been a lot of those over the years in gaming. Ugh. I'm done rambling. I'm just so frustrated. So Valve, do something. And not just secretly behind closed doors. Do something public. Make a statement. Just stop it. Stop doing this to me. Stop doing this to everyone. Just stop it. It hurts. Goodbye.